So I felt like when I was a third year, picking clerkships was a stressful and confusing experience, and it was just kind of hard for me to do. So I made this video to go over what me and some of my classmates have to say about some of the clerkships. And hopefully it'll be helpful, or maybe it will be a complete waste of time. So anyway, I made some of the, I have the Y column with some of the clerkships, and in the X column we have some of the pluses and minuses that people have to say about not clerkships programs. Things about time commitments, what taking the shelf was like, grades, and the community feel. So I'll start with the traditional program, which is kind of like your classic medical student third year clerkship experience. And so we have 7 core clerkships in 6 blocks. And some of the pluses that people have to say. So good things, you get to see a variety of clinical settings. So for instance, I was able to do surgery and medicine at the 2 big county hospitals, SFGH and Highland. And then I immediately went over to Kaiser Oakland to do some of my other experiences. And that was really interesting for me to see. Other pluses are that everything is in 2-month or less blocks. And so it was really good for me, this is the program that I did, to just have something for 2 months and a discrete 2 months and then just be done with it. Another plus are that you have kind of these 2-week, you have these 3 2-week blocks of time that you get to choose what to do with. And so peds, OB-GYN, and family medicine are each 6 weeks, and there are 8-week blocks of time. And so a lot of people use 1 for vacation, 1 for anesthesia, and 1 for a surgical subspecialty, but you could take 2 weeks of vacation. You could take two 2-week vacations. Another plus for the traditional program is that you have some control, at least, over picking the order of your sites and kind of picking where your sites are. So for instance, I really wanted to do well in medicine, and so I did surgery before doing medicine because I felt like having that inpatient experience would help me do better in medicine. Some of the minuses of the traditional program, so there's not a lot of continuity. So for instance, unlike in Pisces or Click, where you have a whole year to get to know your preceptors, you only might have a few weeks in your clerkships to get to know people. And so that kind of sucks for some people. Although the caveat is that there is this longitudinal clerkship experience, which is kind of like an 8th hidden clerkship, where you go half a day every week to your longitudinal preceptor, and so that's a nice place for continuity. Another big minus is that you really don't have much control over your time. So I found that there's far less flexibility in me. For example, if I had to go do like a doctor's appointment or whatever, like it was really hard to find time to do that because there's just not a lot of control that you have over that. Oh, I guess that's this category. Messed up already. All right, cool. Okay, so for shelves, this is kind of just like your standard. You have 2 months or however long your clerkship is to study for your shelf, and you take your shelf at the end, and then basically at the end of your clerkship, or actually it'll be a few weeks after your clerkship, you'll get your grades. And so grades are comprised of 2 things, usually your shelf score and your clinical evaluations. And so for most things, your evals will come at the very end. And a few weeks after the clerkship, you'll know if you honored or not. A lot of people ask about sort of the community, like what the community is like with the other med students in particular. And I found that for me, in general, I've made some friends, but I typically still felt like an outsider, just being like a JMP student coming into a group of people who have already known each other for 2 years. So that felt just okay. Model is really popular with a lot of JMP students, and I would say it's also really popular with a lot of the UCSF students. I think one thing that's confusing about model is how the schedule within model works. So I want to explain that a little bit. So model takes up three 2-month blocks for a total of 6 months, and they kind of split students up in model peds and model OB into different cohorts, and you'll sort of have like 6 mini blocks. So for example, Tara's schedule, she had 1 month of medicine, then she had another month of peds, and then she had a month of community medicine. And this was kind of confusing to me. So during community medicine, this is a time when you're going to specialty medicine clinics for a half day, 2 times a week. For example, something like endocrinology clinic or something like that. And the rest of the time you have to do your community project, which is a project that you do that has some sort of service to the community. The fourth, and then there's sort of a repeat of the schedule. So you would do medicine again for a month, then you would do peds, and then you have kind of 2 weeks of community medicine, and then 2 weeks of extra time where a lot of people do anesthesia or a surgical subspecialty, or vacation. And throughout all of this, you also have your family medicine clerkship. And so 1 day a week, you would go to your family medicine clerkship program, wherever that is. So Tara had hers at West Berkeley Family Practice. Some of the pluses that people said about model, they actually said that it was really nice to just be at one site. They were able to get to know people. It was great working with the underserved, which is the population that SFGH tends to serve. And a lot of people really liked the family medicine component of model. They said that having 1 day a week going to family medicine was kind of a break from whatever clerkship you're in. And also it was really nice to have longitudinal contact with a lot of patients. And so both Tara and Yu Yang were able to see patients multiple times throughout their family medicine clerkship. And then it's kind of nice to have like 2 tries at at each clerkship. So you kind of have 2 tries at medicine or like 2 tries at peds. So that might be nice. Some of the negatives. So Tara was saying that she thought that it would be really nice to split up medicine and peds and to kind of have time in between to study for the shelves and to take a break. But it ended up being a really stressful situation splitting them up. Because it felt like she had both on her plate at the same time to have to study for both shelves. Another thing that people mentioned was that there's sort of this course called Practice Inquiry that you have to sit through. I think it's like a few hours during an afternoon every week. And some of the sessions were super kind of annoying. During Wednesday afternoon, there's this one like forced ethics session that took up a lot of time, and it ended up being like 6 to 8 seminars, and that just seemed annoying to sit through. In terms of time, so for your blocks of medicine and peds or OB, you would be those are kind of the same as the traditional program, like you're on the wards, or for peds, you might be in peds clinic or something like that. So your time is not really your own. However, during community medicine, there's a lot of time where you would be able to have personal time and go do whatever you wanted. So the community medicine time was really nice for people because they were able to go and do whatever they needed to do. The shelf I kind of already mentioned. For some people, it's really nice to have the shelf split up, or to have the medicine and peds clerkships split up, and you would take your medicine shelf at the end of medicine here, and you would take your peds shelf at the end of peds here. And so, for example, you could use community medicine time to study for the shelf. And so that might be nice for some people. Other people were saying that was, like Tara was saying, that was really stressful because she didn't end up studying too much during the first 2 mini blocks, and instead has everything crammed at the end. Grades for model. So one thing that people mention is that you kind of get evals out as you go. And so they also use eValue to send you evals and your residents and attendings and stuff. And so that's kind of weird sometimes because you're getting evals from people and then you have to go and work with them again. And for some people it might be weird to kind of have know what they think about you and then have to go back to working with them. And it's also of note that you get your grades at the end of model. And so for some people some people don't care about the grades, and for some people that's kind of stressful to have to wait all the way to the end of the 6 months before you know what your grades are. And in terms of the community, just being at one site, it's nice to be able to start recognizing people and some of the attendings and people who work there, and so there's this sense of community. And with the other students, certainly with a smaller group, you are able to make better friends with people. Yang was saying that the community is about 0.1% of what the JMP really is. So it's like the JMP, but only 1%. Okay, moving on. So for Pisces, both Pisces and Click, remember these are the longitudinal programs, and they kind of have like the crazy schedules where one morning you'll be in hem-onc clinic, and then in the afternoon you'll have to go to your adolescent medicine clinic, and then the next day you'll be in general surgery in the OR all day, and then the next day, like whatever, you have like white space time or whatever. So both of those are kind of like that. So for Pisces, one plus is that if you have an idea of what you want to go to, you can really fill up your white space time with that thing. So what we mean about that is, or what they meant about that is, for example, if you already knew that you wanted to do gyne oncology, which is a pretty specialized field, you could fill up your time going to gyne onc clinic or scrubbing into the OR with gyne onc physicians. And that's really unique amongst medical students because not a lot of people get to do that. Aiden, who is 2 years above us, was saying that she was interested in anesthesia, so she was actually in Click, but she was able to go do tons of anesthesia with people, and when she was interviewing, she could say that she had like 6 weeks of anesthesia experience or something, which no other medical student had. So that was a huge advantage for her. A disadvantage of Pisces it turns out, is also the white space time. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to decide what to fill it up with, and then other times, like, you just end up filling it up with studying, and so sometimes it ends up being this hard thing to manage when you're actually not told what to do. Another disadvantage is that you're kind of, or at least Eric felt like he was exposed to less content overall. And this is because you don't spend a lot of time on the wards. Most of it is an outpatient experience. And Eric felt like he just learned less in the outpatient setting. And then finally, there's just less resident interaction. And I suppose you could say that the plus side of that is there's a lot of attending interaction. Okay. In terms of time, because of the white space time, you are able to have a lot of space for personal time. So, for example, Eric was saying he was able to have a lot of time for writing and etc., those sorts of things. And in terms of the shelf, one good thing about having the white space time is that you do have time to study for the shelf. However, remember that for both Pisces and Click, the shelves are sort of thrown in towards the end of your rotation, so you might have one shelf every 3 to 4 weeks, which for some people is pretty crammed together. For the grades, you don't actually know your grades until the very end of your year, and so that can be very stressful because sometimes it's hard for people to know how you're doing. I think both Pisces and Click have a way of kind of checking in, checking in with you on how you're doing. They kind of have this like quarterly system for feedback where every quarter you get some feedback about your performance, and each quarter that feedback gets incorporated into your grade, and the last feedback session counts the most, and the first one counts the least, or something like that. So you kind of know how you're doing, but it's also can be stressful that you don't really know if you honored or not until the very end. Um, and then in terms of community, I think, yeah, I didn't actually ask Eric about that, so I don't know. Sorry. Okay, so Click is obviously really similar to Pisces, except it's at Kaiser Oakland, not at Parnassus. Some of the pluses that people said, uh, like rotations that you don't like are over soon. So you would never have 6 or 8 weeks straight of something. For example, for both Click and Pisces, they have 2 weeks of surgery where they're actually 2 weeks of inpatient surgery where they're doing inpatient stuff in the OR, and they have 2 weeks of inpatient medicine. Um, so, okay, bad things over soon. Um, and another plus, of course, is the white space time. You can use it for things that you're interested in. You can use it for studying, etc. And then something else that Daniel was mentioning is that Click is kind of like MS4. You're able to do a lot of specialty stuff that you wouldn't get exposed to during MS3. For example, he's able to work at this HIV care clinic, and he's also able to go to an adolescent health clinic, and that was really cool. A minus, so Daniel felt like he wasn't sure if sometimes it didn't seem like he had enough time to really master certain things, whereas maybe for traditional, because you're spending so much time doing something, you are able to master something. However, perhaps because of the white space time, if you felt like you weren't mastering something, you could supplement your white space time, or supplement that thing using your white space time. And studying for the shelves can be really challenging, again, because you're kind of backloaded, and just having one every 3 to 4 weeks is pretty hard time-wise. Daniel ended up using some of his white space time to study for the shelves, which was good and nice, but he felt like he would rather have the white space time for clinical activities. And finally, a third minus is that people at Kaiser Oakland, despite it being their program, often didn't know what Click was, and so he felt like he had to keep explaining what Click was to people and that he wasn't a traditional student, much like your experience being a JMP student. So time-wise, again, the white space time was really valuable for personal time, and yeah. The shelf stuff I kind of already talked about. Grades, similar to Pisces, you get your grades at the end, and that can be stressful for some people, or for people who don't really care about grades, it doesn't really matter. And it seemed like, from what Daniel was saying, the community in Click has been really good with all the students, and it feels like the JMP. Okay. I don't really know a lot about Fresno or Valor. I think Rand was going to send you guys something about Valor, but for Fresno, I know what I've heard from Anoop, who did surgery there, and some other people who did peds there. Maybe the teaching isn't as good at Fresno, and that Fresno itself kind of sucks to live in. It gets really hot sometimes, gets really cold other times, so that sucks. I think for Valor, so Valor's at the VA, and you're kind of doing medicine, surgery, and then I'm not sure what the last one is there. And so Valor is kind of more similar to traditional, and it's not like model. You would do like 2 months of medicine, 2 months of surgery, and then 2 months of the last one. From what I know, so my LCE is at Valor, so I think like the patient population is really cool to work with. But one thing that's can be repetitive is that their problem lists are all the same. Like pretty much everybody is a smoker, diabetic, has hypertension, has coronary artery disease, etc. So you kind of see the same thing over and over again. It's a lot of males and not a lot of females, and so it's kind of maybe a little unbalanced that way. And I know that the teaching, at least in medicine at Valor, is supposed to be the best, with some of like the what do you call it, like the really well-known attendings who supposedly teach really well. That's pretty much all I have to say. So obviously this isn't representative of what everybody thinks, just some of the classmates that I talk to and what I think. And we're always open to questions from you guys, so feel free to email us. The last things that I would have to say are that Model and Click have become more and more popular over the years, and so they're certainly not guaranteed. And I would say that pretty much everybody in our class ranked Model first, and only 2 people were able to get into Model. So make sure that you have a backup option in addition to your first and second choices. And really, like, everybody that I talked to was happy with their choice, whatever they ended up getting. And so I think you end up just going along with whatever you get and being happy with whatever you get. So so even though it feels super stressful now, everything, and everybody tells you this, things will probably turn out pretty well. So yeah, that's it.